Is there any moment you got really disappointed or you crumbled?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's not true. Every once in a while, though, what's really disappointing is when we have an idea that's so good and then we learn it's super illegal or it is not physically possible.
Actually, that happens quite frequently.
That happens quite frequently, yeah.
But you're gonna make anything possible at the end.
When I say not physically possible, I mean like not possible under the laws of physics. The science does not exist to do these things sometimes.
네, 안녕하세요. 사고실험의 최성운입니다. 오늘 정말 특별한 날입니다. 아마 이분들의 이름은 많이 들어보지 못하셨더라도 이분들이 만든 제품은 한 번쯤 보셨을 거라고 생각이 되는데요. 아톰 슈즈라고 불려지는 빅 레드 부츠, 나이키에게 고소를 당했던 사탄 슈즈, 소금 알갱이보다 작은 루이비통 백, 이 모든 화제의 제품을 만든 미스치프가 한국에 방문했습니다. 오늘 사고실험에서는 이분들을 모시고 창의성의 비밀을 파헤쳐보는 그런 시간을 가져보고자 합니다. 네, 그럼 여러분께 미스치프를 소개하겠습니다. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
First of all, I may ask you questions about everything, but please, I want you to know that I'm not here to offend you. I hope that we can have a conversation as a friend.
Mm-hmm. The feeling is mutual.
Sounds
Yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah.
Sounds great.
Whatever we do, we're not trying to offend you.
Yeah.
So, please introduce yourself.
I'm Gabe.
Yeah, and what did you do in Mischief?
I'm the CEO.
Oh, you're the guy.
I'm the business guy.
Okay.
I'm Lucas, along with Kevin, the creative person.
Lucas is our intern.
Very nervous.
It's his last day.
I'm Kevin. Along with Lucas, I am the creative person.
Yeah, I can see your long hair and beard.
Yeah. That's how you know. You get more creative the longer your hair and your beard are.
Yeah. When did you arrive to Korea?
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
A little jet lagged. If I say something crazy, it's because...
I prefer you to be in a crazy mode.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
I've heard that you guys come to Korea for your first public exhibition, which takes places in Daerim Museum. Can you tell a brief background about how did you start this project?
I guess Dalem cold emailed us, right?
They contacted us actually, saying they wanted to do an exhibition with Mischief, and it's the first exhibition since the pandemic. I'm half Korean, Kevin is half Korean, we have Korean friends, but we didn't know what Dalem was, so we had to ask around and be like, okay, is this a real museum? Is it a scam? People try to scam us all the time.
We get a lot of crazy emails.
Yeah, and we scammed them back. So the question was do we scam the museum but turns out it's a very legitimate, well-respected museum.
Yeah.
We said, sure, we just need to find one piece of everything that we've ever done, which was actually a lot harder than you would think. We had to buy some of our stuff back from fans. Now we have a show 11 months later.
I think for the audience who don't know a lot about you, we should explain a little more about your working style, that you drop products.
More like ideas.
Ideas.
You know?
Okay.
But they come in the form factor that is the most effective at communicating that idea.
Each idea.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When we have an idea that we want to express to the world, we can then quickly figure out the form factor that is the most impactful at doing that. Like manufacturing 5,000 keys that work to a single automobile, or melting down guns into swords to take weapons off the street in America, or filling a shoe with blood. We can kind of do anything, which is really fun.
What did you expect the audience takes away from it?
Hopefully they take everything and there's nothing left.
Yeah. For me, if people can look at all the work and take away the idea that you can make creative artworks in all of these different spaces and mediums. I mean, even the title of the show, Nothing is Sacred, I think we're trying to show that nothing is that sacred that you can't mess with it.
It's kind of hard to define what Mischief is. How do you define yourself? I know this is kind of a cliche, but I have to ask.
I actually, and I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I love not answering that. Because I think it's important that Mischief doesn't have too concrete of a definition, because that allows us to have this power to seamlessly transition between these different spaces, right? And when you walk through the museum show, you're going to see what looks like traditional art. You'll see fashion, but you'll see robotics, electronics, weapons, literally everything, right?
Yeah.
In a way, I think the confusion you feel trying to understand Mischief is unintentionally intentional, kind of. I think it's a good thing.
So you're just the guys and girls who make crazy stuff.
That's pretty good, honestly. We'll take it.
Yeah, we'll update Wikipedia now.
Today's talk has two main themes. One is like creativity of mischief. Can you explain about the process that you start with the idea and bring it to reality?
I mean, I think internally, even the way we started, where you're like, oh, Gabe's the business guy. Gabe's not just a business guy. Everybody at Mischief is inherently like a super creative person, and we collectively come up with a bunch of ideas.
The ideas are kind of like the internal language at Mischief in a way. Like I'd say, sure, we do brainstorms and we document our ideas and have like a curation process like Lucas said, but on the other side there's like this almost like fluid environment of just like constant looking at the world through the Mischief lens, and a lot of ideas also kind of like shape organically just through the culture that we have.
I like the term mischief lens. How can I get one?
We'll sell you some for
$200.
You mean the mischief lens means the way you guys are looking at the world? Or
Yeah.
Can you describe a little more about the way you see the world and find the idea?
The interesting thing is we all come from actually very different backgrounds. Like there are 30 of us, like there are 3 of us here, but there are 30 of us all over, and we all have very different backgrounds. But I think it's sort of perspective-wise, we all offer something to the table. It really is a collaborative process.
We're often looking for the places where a small intervention can have outsized effect. So in the case of the car, for example, like the simple intervention is simply, hey, they make keys where you push a button and it goes beep and the car unlocks, but no one ever said the codes had to be unique. So if you want, you can hook up 5,000 keys to the same car. That's just sort of a possibility that exists in the infrastructure of car manufacturing. And because that's there, we can take advantage of it.
Yeah, human beings live in a series of systems that are inherently imperfect. To us, those are like glorious opportunities to do something very interesting.
So you guys have thousands of ideas lists and you need to decide. I'm asking you about the standards, like you evaluate ideas.
We look at like every possible facet of the idea to bring it to life in the best way. And so in this evaluation process, it's not even necessarily just like the idea itself, but also how it shows up in the world, when it shows up in the world. We're thinking so much more beyond just if like this is a good idea or not. I mean, these guys can talk about that part too.
For example, the guns to swords idea was an idea that we had very early in Mischief, and this was a gun buyback program that we ran where instead of paying people for their guns like police departments do, we took their guns, melted them down, cast them into swords, and gave all the gun owners their guns back as swords. And we just physically couldn't do it early on. Like we were not at a stage where we had the production capabilities to do it. But when we got to a stage, when we grew enough that we could actually do it, I also think there's sort of like a collective gut sense when an idea is good. Like I think we all kind of realize like, oh, this is a banger, let's just do it.
Yeah. The other thing is like the benefit of the big list of ideas is that they sit there for a while, because a lot of times you don't really know if an idea is good until you've looked at it a dozen times over the course of 6 months and you're still excited about it. The pool serves an important function, which is just it is a test of whether we all remain excited about something. And generally, if we're all still excited about something over the course of months or even years sometimes, we can be pretty confident that it's good.
That's impressive because like every masterpieces of art, they all endure the time.
Much longer times than this, but yes.
But yes, our works are masterpieces.
Hundo Pro.
Sure. Can I ask you questions about particular drops? One single favorite is severe spots. Maybe because I saw the film that you offer, like Lucas, you're cutting the spots. Like,
Yeah.
Can you explain short about the spots?
I mean, so Severed Spots was a piece where we bought a Damien Hirst spot painting and decided we'd chop all the spots out of the work so that we could sell the spots individually to many more people so that many more people could own a Damien Hirst. It's also another thing where like art is so sacred to so many people. Chopping up a Damien Hirst was like very
collectors were messaging us saying like, this makes me want to throw up.
Gabe, do you want to tell the story of actually picking up the piece? So
the act of acquiring this piece actually showed me like so many more layers about this project. So we contacted the gallery, we made an offer for the piece, and I think we paid like $25,000.
Yeah.
And as we're like handling the paperwork, he says, congratulations, by the way, this piece is probably going to 2 or 3x in value over the next 3 to 5 years. And as I walked away, I said, it's going to do that like tomorrow, right? And that was sort of an interesting thing because at no point in my conversation with the gallerist did we talk about like why the piece was interesting or what it meant or why it's significant. He purely positioned it as an investment vehicle. It showed that this piece was perfect for what we were trying to do with it.
Yeah.
When all the individual spots had been sold, they started showing up on secondary markets. We were tracking them because the price started going up and that was fun to see. But we realized there was this whole meta-narrative where people had just made up the idea that the green spots were rare. And they were worth way more than the others, which is just out of nowhere. There was this desperate sort of market invention of another layer.
When I see every single drop that you made, I can always find a sense of humor, like a black humor. Like, is this correct?
Yeah. Because we make a lot of different products, we make things in a lot of different categories. We don't actually have a single unifying aesthetic look. I do think that a sense of humor is in some ways kind of like the recognizable aesthetic.
I also think humor is one of the best ways to get certain concepts and thoughts to people and have them engage with it.
I mean, I usually feel like that you guys like mocking brands or conglomerates and capitalism itself. Why do you find it fun to make fun of them?
To be honest, I think most people don't think they're touchable. It's sort of sacred and set in stone, and they have so much ownership over the imagery that they produce. But we are existing within that environment all the time. I just think it's sort of unfair not to be able to mess with it, even though I know we've been on the bad side of that.
Specifically, the three of us you have sitting here at the table all grew up very isolated from pop culture.
So we had no friends and we're really lame.
Oh man. But like we grew up without television. Gabe grew up like basically without the internet. When we finally started to engage with pop culture, it seemed ridiculous.
Yeah, well, personally, like I entered sort of like the real world of pop culture at like the age of 21, 22. It's like my eyes opened wide and I saw like how much control and power these existing systems had over how people live, right? Like how much power celebrities have an influence over like your daily choices, how much power the brands have, how much power the government has. These just seemed like very obvious systems to do something with.
Then what are you guys are fan of what? Not pop culture, but what did you consume?
Oh, we were so cool. I mean, for me, it was just books, tons and tons and tons of books.
A lot of music and like fine art stuff.
I think one of the really funniest things about Mischief is like Lucas was saying earlier, everyone has such different backgrounds. And I think we are becoming pretty well known in the spaces that we're playing in, but most of us don't have formal background or track record or history of success in these spaces. So there's something to be said about like this outsider approach that you don't know what you don't know. And we just kind of did stuff without thinking about it. And here we are.
I mean, honestly, designing or making things without an explicit understanding of certain things can free you up to try things that other people think are set in stone.
And as Lucas mentioned about negative effects of playing with brands, can we mention the Satan shoes?
Let us call our lawyer.
I mean, you didn't really expect that kind of lawsuit or something?
Honestly, no.
The good thing about being outsiders is we don't know how things are made, so we learn how to make them, and we also don't inherently understand the risks when we do things.
But when that risk become real, I wonder the atmosphere of team when you first heard the news from your lawyer or...
Oh, we didn't hear it from our lawyer. You know how we found out? We found out because we read an article. Some journalist who had seen the public court filing and published something. And so we just read online that we were being sued.
Not even that. Another journalist emailed us saying, do you care to comment on this article that was written about your lawsuit?
What? Nike sued us?
Yeah. I mean, the crazy thing is we did the Jesus shoe before the Satan shoe.
Yeah.
And that had extremely positive reception. You wouldn't expect that change. It's only a flip of heaven and hell to some extent, and that led to...
I mean, I think the thing that's interesting about Satan's Shoes lawsuit and why this question is unavoidable for us is just we are doing a lot of sampling, like music sampling.
Yeah.
You know, we like to use things that exist in culture, whether that's a shoe or a brand or Christianity. it has this whole weight of associations, and people feel a connection to these symbols so that when you use them to make new things, you get to use all of the weight of those references to build with. So when we were first coming up with Jesus Shoes, it was sort of as brand collaborations were reaching sort of the ubiquity that just like everybody collabs with everybody to the point that it doesn't mean anything anymore. We were trying to extrapolate that to an absurd extreme. And we thought, well, Nike, as you say, is kind of a big company. What can you pair them with? And one of very few symbols that holds up to the swoosh is the cross. And then we thought, well, if you fill the soul with water, instead of walking on air, you're walking on water with every step, which was very cute.
And it looked really cool.
Yeah.
And it turns out that you can just order holy water from the River Jordan from industrial holy water suppliers. So it all came together very nicely. And then when we get to Satan Shoes, all of a sudden we have the backlash to that working process, which is IP law. Like, you can't do that. That's ours. It's funny to us, and part of the reason it's so surprising is that in the fine art world, like, this question has been fully played out. You have Andy Warhol doing silk screens of Marilyn Monroe or the Campbell soup can. It's kind of like, didn't we do this all? Wasn't this all fine?
Yeah, and I think Mischief as an entity, I think also pushes some of that because we're so confusing from the outside as an artist group. I think in my mind, it's sort of like Warhol wanted to be a factory, a company, a business, and he said business was like the highest form of art, but we're trying to embody that to such an extent. I think people are so confused because what we are doing is art, but it is operating as a business.
Our palette is the operation of a business, 100%.
I really like that quote.
Hundo Po.
Our palette is operation of business itself. I heard that one of your nickname is Banksy on the internet.
We have seen that years.
Yeah. You don't like it? I mean, the reaction is not really...
Like, I think he's done quite a bit of subversive stuff and interesting work, but I think right now the image of him, it feels less actively subversive than it purports to be.
It's a little unfair to Banksy because he's actually got a lot of really interesting work. But I think we also all kind of feel that just his black and white stencil graffiti is kind of boring.
So I brought him because it seems that people have some expectations on you or your work to keep making people uncomfortable or keep weird kind of that. Is it kind of a pressure? Because when you start this, I guess you may not expect that you could be this successful.
I think we put pressure on ourselves.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we acknowledge pressure from other people.
We definitely do put pressure on ourselves to sort of like keep trying to reach higher. I mean, even going back to this notion of having a long list of ideas that we don't think we can execute yet kind of keeps us chasing them as a white whale, if you will.
But I don't think we ever sit down and be like, here's what the people want from us.
Right.
Like, we never do that.
One of the things Mischief doesn't do that most businesses do is analytics. We are not tracking our users.
Yeah.
Is it like intention that less you know about your
Customers, the better. I wouldn't go that far.
And before like you release drop, do you expect that this one's gonna gain some attraction or how the people gonna react? I mean, do you care about it?
Do we have any KPIs, business guy?
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, cool. I think it still is kind of like we said earlier, a feeling. I think that's a good thing. Like, you start with the feeling and then you build the rest around it. Versus like if we did the opposite, we might start to lose ourselves, you know?
So what makes Mischief as Mischief? What protects you from losing yourself?
I think we protect each other, honestly. Yeah,
Teammates.
yeah. We do have to like sustain ourselves so that we can continue to be able to do what we do. We can't lose the thing that got us here.
What are the things that brought you here?
Not knowing any better, not understanding risk, how to make anything. Yeah.
Then what do you like most about your job or being Mischief?
Honestly, some of the happiest moments are just making something and then seeing the first sample of it. There's a joy that I will just never get over.
Yeah. The actual act of creation continues to be like a huge thrill.
in that moment, we kind of be the audience for our own stuff. When like the
Yeah.
first completed version shared with the team and we all see it, I think that's often a moment where we all sort of go like, oh, cool.
Then who gives the call? Like, okay, it's done. It doesn't need to be modified or.
To some extent, it is a timeline thing. I mean, one thing we talk about quite a bit is just being extremely athletic with our production. I think if we didn't have deadlines and timelines, you can become obsessive about making things perfect. It's better to just be athletic. I think one thing you have said, people generally just remember their favorite thing they've seen you do and the last thing they've seen you do. So I think it's okay to take risks with certain things.
It's okay for us to be uncomfortable when we do things. Maybe it's kind of good actually.
The core foundation of Mischief is kind of just two principles. We are going to make anything that we want to make, and we are going to release it often. If it's just we're going to make what we are going to want to make, you can workshop forever, right? Like, but if you have committed yourself mind, body, and soul to we will release 2 things every month, that constraint keeps you honest. It forces you to just kind of like pull the trigger. And I think that's very, very important.
Why do you think that notion is so important?
So, Lucas, you mentioned the idea of being athletic. There's a text that we were very influenced, a net artist whose name is Brad Trammell, which was titled Athletic Aesthetics. He talks about a lot of things, but one of the points that he makes is that if you are a working artist and you want to be influential, it's important to kind of like speed match with the culture around you. You should be athletic. You should release frequently, because otherwise you just don't exist within the flow of content intake that people have.
But when you handle, like, I mean, right now you sit over here, but maybe 10 or 20 projects are still in process simultaneously. And how do you handle all those things?
Project management software. We just kind of got used to it. This is like only way we know how to exist. But I think like a characteristic of Mischief is we're very quick. And our quality is very good, but also very quick. We make decisions very quickly, and there is a lot of trust. We're all thinking about a lot of things at the same time. Culture is more of like a spectrum across many things. It probably wouldn't make sense for us to go like too deep down one particular path without keeping an eye on the other paths at the same time.
Well, how do you feel?
Great,
It's fun,
super fun.
Learned a lot about you by the questions that you ask.
Yeah.
Before I met you, I imagined a lot of versions of you.
What did you think?
To be honest, maybe you guys are more like aggressive guys and the crazy guys. Or maybe you guys are more like pretentious.
Interesting,
yeah.
interesting.
But what I feel now is you just really like making things together. I think your teamwork is kind of more powerful than I think.
The best thing we ever made was friendship.
Hey, whoa.
Well, there's a question. Do you fight? Do you argue often? There must be a conflict between each other.
Who do you think wins in a fight?
I think Kevin.
Oh, interesting.
Ooh.
Not true?
I am extremely fragile.
Vulnerable. Yes.
No, we do fight. Not that often, actually. Maybe less often than you imagine. But it is usually very productive.
We try to give ourselves a regular opportunity to fight.
Yeah.
Which I actually think is very important.
Yeah.
We don't really give the ability to fester. We're always talking very regularly and forcing ourselves to like check assumptions and challenge each other, and then maybe twice a year they have a fight. But the good thing is, because that doesn't happen often, I think we all pay a lot of attention when it does. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is probably serious.
Also, similar question, but why do you enjoy working each other?
Well, Kevin's really vulnerable. And Lucas is funny.
I mean, I think we all have very different ways of looking at the world. Like, I don't know, like Kevin, maybe from perspective, I think you might look much more from a written conceptual perspective, but I definitely look at the world in images. Gabe maybe much more from like system, like with everybody at Mischief. I think there's so many of us. It's just fun to work with people who coming at problems from very different angles and then coming together to solutions.
The fun thing for me is like, I think we constantly give ourselves the impossible task. Like we are always dealing with something that feels impossible. The odds are stacked against us. And every time that happens, I can hear Kevin's voice in my head right now. It's like, oh baby, let's go. Like, and most people would crumble. Honestly, like typically, like for anyone else, they would be like, okay, this is too much. I can't handle this right now. Like this is too overwhelming. And they're right. Like it's impossible, right? But Kevin always says that. And Lucas everybody echoes that. Like everyone at Mischief is down. When the impossible kicks up, I think people actually feel galvanized into
Vigorous.
action. Yeah.
Is there any moment like you got really disappointed or you crumbled?
I don't think so. Yeah, I actually don't think so.
Okay, that's not true. Every once in a while, though, what's really disappointing is when we have an idea that's so good, and then we learn one of two things. It's super illegal, or it is not physically possible. That is disappointing.
Actually, that happens quite frequently.
That happens quite frequently. Yeah. It's like, you're going to jail for 30 years.
We draw the line at 30 years.
Yeah.
But you're gonna make anything possible, like at the end.
When I say not physically possible, I mean like not possible under the laws of physics. The science does not exist to do these things sometimes.
From now on, I'm gonna ask you about perspective of like business entity. First simple question is, how do you guys make money?
What do you think?
Yeah, how do you think we make money?
Well, I know that you got invested from like venture capitals. You also sell your products, but you don't do other like production works for other companies.
No,
you always do original projects.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
I think it's funny because like we live at a time where it's so preposterous that the business model is you make something and then you sell it. But that's literally it. We make the things and then sometimes we sell it. But sometimes we make things that we don't sell too,
Yeah.
right? Or we make things that
We lose money on.
we lose money on.
Just because we want to do it.
Yeah, because we have to do it, you know?
You have to do it.
Yeah.
You don't feel kind of threatened about that kind of financial balance?
We're still here. I think part of the ambition is to figure out how to like make both sides of this continue to work. Like how do you use the vehicle of a business to push forward the art practice? And they have to sort of like really work well together. You know, it's not like we have the art group over there making the art and then there's the business guys over there like negotiating ad placement on the art or sponsor, although maybe we should do that.
Yeah, if the price is right. You never know.
Yeah, exactly.
We could do something with that.
And some people recognize Mischief as a brand, but I don't think you guys are in the normal concept of brand, because if you are a brand, you should have flagship product to sell permanently, and you guys should care about your core fans and sell them more. But what's really crazy is you make stuff every 2 weeks, which has different form factors, different concepts, and different materials and different sizes. In a business sense, this is really cost ineffective way. I'm just curious, are you intentionally denying or like rejecting any principle of brands or kind of that?
So in some ways, yes, and maybe in other ways, no. So making completely new things in completely different industries constantly is not an efficient way to generate revenue from products. That said, it doesn't mean we don't.
And it doesn't mean
Maybe
Mischief
not as
is not
much.
a good business.
That's also true.
Yeah.
Mischief is a great business.
It's also true. So there's a few points here, but so one, also yes, Mischief is a brand, but I think the trick here is there are many different ways to be a fan of that brand. There are some people who are a fan of the sense of humor that we've been talking about. To them, it is almost like an entertainment company. There are some people who've only seen like one or two things we've ever released and probably think like, oh, Mischief makes video games.
Yeah.
Or Mischief makes sneakers. That's
Sneakers.
like far more common. Every once in a while, we have opportunities to kind of double down on those things, sometimes totally by accident. Like when we were talking about Jesus shoes and Satan shoes, we were making them basically to make fun of sneakerheads, but the sneakerheads really liked it. And that gave us an opportunity to make more shoes.
And I don't think we would have ever thought that we would have ended up in this
Totally.
space.
That was not
Yeah.
part of the plan. That was discovered. There's just a lot of unexplored territory that we're still working our way. At the same time, we also get to sell some shoes. And as we've sort of observed, part of the project of Mischief, it is to use this form of business to its fullest extent. You know, if we were sitting here and we were actively not trying to make revenue, if we were saying we deny all terms and definitions, that would not be a full use of the format that we have chosen.
I wonder how you do your IR pitches in front of the investors. Maybe some people doubt like they should make more money or like that. Like, don't they ever questions you about would you make more money? Like kind of that.
There's many different types of investors at the end of the day, right? It might be easy to generalize them in two categories. One category is an investor who invests in something that they're familiar with and that the world is familiar with, that there's like pattern matching. And then there's the type of investor who invests in something that is extremely unfamiliar, not just to them, but to a lot of people, maybe everyone. Mischief falls into that category, and I think our investors also fall into that category. And I think that makes for like a smart investor, because like you're actually trying to see past your current reality into what the future could be, and you're willing to take a bet on that.
Venture.
That's venture. Yeah, so the pitch is just like hop on in, like we're going somewhere.
I mean,
you know.
And I think for a contemporary business, we're operating at the pace that everybody else is moving in culture, but most companies are not. You might think it's more risky, but it's more risky to not in that state of reinvention all the time.
Yeah, it's totally true, because a lot of investors will ask like, how do you survive for like 5 years or 10 years? And for us, this is the only life we know. It's a constant cycle of newness and reinvention. Yeah.